probably my viewers, they might relate to me in that we've never been taught like church history
Yeah,
necessarily. So it's kind of strange. It's a little strange to start just thinking about, well, so there were Christians sometime in history that thought different things about Christianity than what we do. And so it's kind of hard to navigate that sometimes, you
for
know?
sure. Yeah, and there's a lot to be learned from the church fathers. This broad era, the first few centuries. What did the earliest Christians think about Christianity? And sometimes the questions they were dealing with, they were forced to deal with culturally, politically, and sociologically. Those questions were a lot different than the types of questions we deal with today. And sometimes we carry our own hermeneutical baggage, the way we interpret the Bible. We do it from our 21st century lens, and we can be biased. We may not even know it, right? That's the idea of the bias, is that it's a blind spot for us when we're reading the Bible, and we impose our own context into the words. We try to make sense of the words, and that's when we can frequently come to misinterpretation. So sometimes when reading the church fathers, we can help realize, oh, that was a bias or a weakness, a blind spot for me. And it's interesting looking at the text this way. So of course, that doesn't mean the church fathers were always correct, by no means, but they help us to make us more aware of those blind spots.
They were like us in the sense that they were trying to understand what the authors were writing and how it relates to their time in history.
Yeah, so it's important to recall, like I'd mentioned, we have a way of interpreting the text. We bring our own hermeneutical baggage. And when we look at the doctrine of original sin, we can frequently see how those weaknesses or blind spots get us. Some of us may come from a religious background, and we were raised in a certain type of church. That church had beliefs we may not find ourselves aligning with, or we haven't even thought of. And so when we begin to look at and explore Christian doctrine for ourselves, so we can have a deeper faith, we can understand sometimes from a very neutral way, how did this denomination come to this belief, right? It doesn't mean we have to agree with it, but we can just explore that journey. So there is a development of Christian doctrine. Let me give one fine example here. The doctrine of the Trinity, which is core Christian belief. The word Trinity does not appear in the Bible anywhere, period. But what happens is, over the first few centuries, you see the church leaders begin to write about and reflect on what the Bible was presenting. And so you see this development. And so there's nothing wrong per se with doctrine developing. And it's just a matter of if we think that development follows in accordance with what Scripture teaches. So with the Trinity, I'm an Orthodox Christian, Orthodox lowercase o. So I do believe that the Scripture teaches the Trinity. On the doctrine of original sin, it's quite complex because there are a variety of perspectives on this. It is, in some senses, a Orthodox issue. In other senses, it is not. And I'm happy to get into that. And so, but let me just start first with, we've used this term original sin. What does this mean, right? And then I'll explain how there are these different nuances, different views.
Can I just jump in real quick?
Sure, yeah.
Don't forget what you're about to say.
No worries. Yeah, go ahead.
So back in those days, which you're going to tell us all right now, all about that.
I'm going to tell you everything from Christian history in the first 500 years. No.
Everything in like 1 to 2 hours.
Yeah.
These people, these fathers that we call them, their Bible study looks a lot different than our Bible study, because they didn't have as many, the people in those days didn't have as many resources as we do today. And so we have like these important figures in history because they were the most educated of their time. Is that why we take certain of these figures more seriously? For example, Augustine.
So it's not necessarily that they were the most educated. Some of them were very, very educated, highly educated. Some of them were not. The reason why we would take them seriously was they were the leaders of the church, and so they had the responsibility to care for and pass on the Christian faith and what the Christian faith meant.
Okay.
And so, of course, they did this, like a pastor would. They would deliver weekly sermons. One of the Greek fathers, John Chrysostom, was a wonderful orator, and he garnered the nickname Golden Tongue for his sermons.
Mm.
He was a beloved preacher. And interestingly enough, here in the West, right, we inherit the Western culture, and in the West, we revere Augustine, and some people, almost to the extent that they revere a gospel author or Saint Paul. And I don't view Augustine with that same type of reverence, for a number of reasons. One, he admits in many places how he changes his mind. He's uncertain about things. So I think it's fully acceptable to disagree with him on some issues. But it's very little recognized that John Chrysostom's corpus, his written works, rival that of Augustine's. But barely any Protestants talk about or write about John Chrysostom. And that's a weakness.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, we inherit our traditions. So we're from the West. I'm a Protestant, so the Protestant tradition has a large debt of gratitude to Augustine's writings. So especially if you're from the Reformed tradition,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily for other Protestant traditions, but especially for the Reformed.
And
Yeah, so I'm going off on a rabbit trail here again.
no, that's perfect. But I just to try to understand, like,
So the reason why we pay attention to these church fathers is because they were the leaders of the church. They had the keys to the treasure box of
how
Christian doctrine.
so how were they? Why were they considered leaders as opposed to other people preaching at that time? Was it
Well, these,
politically?
yeah, these were the people preaching. These are people whose writings have survived through the centuries. So surely there were other preachers whose writings have been lost to history, and we simply don't have them. But
Okay.
these fellows usually held high positions in the church. Some of them held lower positions. Sometimes, for example, the gentleman who would later become a heretic, Arius, he was a presbyter or an elder in his church. So that wasn't the highest position, obviously, of the church in that time period, but it was a respected one. And so he wrote and disagreed with, his what today we might call a pastor. And lo and behold, there's a snowball effect that leads to the Great Council of Nicaea in 325. So, so these are the Christian leaders. They are the preachers. They are the writers. They're the theologians.
Yeah.
They are the Tim Kellers of their day. So
One more. I promise I'm
no
almost
worries.
done.
Yeah,
Two more questions, just to give us, for the people that are not aware of, like, what's going on in church history.
sure.
There's a dynamic also that we should be aware of, that it's been a slow progress for women to have to be seen as not just limited in one role. So it's only recent times that women have been able to. Well, we've developed a more egalitarian view,
Mm-hmm.
just in our culture. So back in these days that we're talking about, that's why the men were holding the main. They were the teachers, right? Predominantly during this time, because would you say that a lot of women were not did not have as much access to this information, because there's also languages involved and things like that, right?
Yeah, I think that's a fair. I haven't looked at the issue in depth as I have,
Hmm.
original sin. But yeah, I think that's a common point that's made. Why aren't there church mothers? Why are these the church fathers? And yeah, we simply, if there had been writings from women, they wouldn't have survived, I guess. So they haven't survived, just as a matter of fact. Very little, perhaps some letters maybe, but nothing of the extent of, Augustine's City of God or other works.
Gotcha.
So it's and even to this day, theology is predominantly a male industry. And although it's nice to see more women becoming interested in it, and it's growing and becoming more acceptable for women to have roles in ministry, formally speaking. So yeah, but we don't want to get too far off the beaten path, because I'm no expert on that subject matter.
And then the last thing, so there's also one more dynamic going on with, you mentioned there are politics involved, but there's something happening having to do with the church leaders have rights somehow to label someone a heretic, and so is that something you're going to be discussing, or should we talk about that a little bit right now?
I mean, I could talk about that briefly. What makes someone a heretic? Heresy is basically a way of just saying, hey, that's not what we believe. And orthodoxy is, rightly ordered belief, a right belief. And so when church councils would come together and form and convene, sometimes this would happen over the matter of weeks or months. And these leaders would discuss and debate. Sometimes it would get heated, what it is that we've believed. And they would even debate a single letter, like an I in a Greek word, and the impact that single letter would have, because it means something. For example, homoousios or homoiousios. There's a difference in meaning between those two Greek words. So when we carve out the boundaries of what is it that Christians believe, if someone were to come along and say something that is contrary to that, we'd say, oh, well, that's heresy. And so someone would be formally ruled a heretic if they had been informed of what the right belief is and refused to recant their beliefs. So they would be excommunicated from the church. So that's sort of how we get heretics. And especially these days in Protestantism, we throw that around loosely, and rarely is it that people are formally excommunicated from churches. Typically in our consumerist society, we just leave and go to another church.
Right.
Joy to